so we can see with us here is actually on my left is the WM01, on my right is the WM03. So you can actually see instantly that there's a huge jump in terms of the shape of the charging case. So for the WM01, you can see that it's boxy, it's very compact, thick, small. If you look at it from the palm of my hand, when we move over to WM03, it's elongated. So you can see here, see it's increased in size by maybe about 30% in length. In terms of width, I think it's the same. But in terms of height, you can see here, WM03, the casing is shorter now. Of course, it's because it's longer as well, so it becomes flatter. Now, in terms of the shape, you can see that it now takes up more palm space in my hand because it's actually longer now. And then compared to WM01, you can see it's taking up just the middle part of my palm. You can see a direct comparison here, how much space it actually takes up. So you can see here, it actually takes up almost the entire bottom part of my palm, whereas WM01 is probably just the middle part with the spaces on the left and right. Next, look at the front of the case with this like this eclipse shaped lid, so that you can actually lift up the lid with one hand. I feel like there's actually more spring in the lid compared to WM01. WM01, the lid doesn't have a lot of spring. Both has a single LED light on the front. On the bottom, WM01 has no description, but WM03 has some technical information. Moving on to the back, both uses USB-C, but just that we can tell that WM03 has the rapid charge technology because of the orange colored USB-C port, and there's a physical button on the WM03. First generation has nothing, right? And both are actually matte finishing. Oh, the minor details. Now, when the lid is open fully, there's actually not much resistance from WM01 except for this creaking sound. Okay, but for the WM03, there's like a tug, you see? There's like it's very snap in place. So no, you can wiggle all around, it doesn't really close. But whereas for the WM01, it will wiggle around, it will close, like you're swinging around, it will close, right? So that's the one major difference between the first generation and the third generation. Next, we look at the earbuds themselves. You can see the positioning. See very obvious that the area within, there's not much space. Everything is being maximized within the WM01, right? But whereas for the WM03, there's a space unutilized on the top half. Positioning is different as well. WM01, the earbuds are more of vertical. WM03 is like slanted. And then the minor details here, you can even see how it has improved. Right, so you can see here, I'm not too sure you can see very clearly on the video here, but there's actually a left and right imprint here. It's not very visible unless you do it at certain lighting angle whereby it's actually shiny. But compared to WM03, it's very visible because the background is actually glossy and the area with the lettering, it's actually cropped out in matte. So it's more visible compared to the first generation. Next, we look at the earbuds. We're gonna go right with right. So instantly you can see that it's almost the same length, but there's also some physical difference as well. As the microphone on the first generation is actually on top of the touch area, whereas for WM03 it's moved to the bottom. But it's still the same. The touch area on both generations, the first generation and third generation, is oval shape, and we are using touch input, and it's actually glossy. We move to the side, so immediately you can see the difference. Alright, over here, this is actually what I mentioned, the rubber padding for grip. This one is actually more of a metal mesh. You can feel some texture of the dots. The finishing treatment is also different as well. Over here, as I mentioned, it's matte throughout the bottom and the top half of the earbud, whereas for the third generation, the top half is matte, the bottom half is glossy, so it's a fingerprint magnet. Here you can also see some differences as well. Right, you can see here that over here is very balanced. Alright, it's very symmetry. The left side and the right side, they're actually symmetry, right? But over here is like shorter, over here is taller, so it's asymmetry. It's like it's tilted at an angle here. So if you can't really see it, I'll put it side by side with WM01, the first generation, and you can actually see that it's very obvious. The third generation, The touch area is actually at an angle, slanted at an angle. Not only that, but you can also tell, let's look at the front, that the positioning of the ear tip is different as well. Over here on the first generation is kinda like just a little bit off center to the right side, but whereas on the third generation is way off the middle. You can see it's going out of the earbud. But this one is not very obvious. For the first generation, it's still within this line, but on the third generation, it's already out of the right margin, right? It's sticking out of the right margin. Then go down to the bottom, that both are still the ear tip. It's circular in shape, but there's a huge improvement in terms of the quality of the material used. On the first generation, it's like a plastic mesh covering the audio outlet, but for the third generation, it's actually a metal mesh. Down to the pogo pins, the charging pogo pins. First generation is using 3 pogo pins. Third generation, is using 2 pogo pins. And I'm not sure if it's very clear, but both actually has a hole here. This is probably maybe for pressure relief, I'm not too sure. Alright, so these are the main physical differences between the first generation and the third generation of the WM series.